choosing the right hearts. So when we talk about the people we have on our team, you will notice, especially if you've been in business for a long time, that typically what we see is that the people that are most successful within a company or within any mission, anything that they do within a team, are the people that are, let's say, the most aligned culturally and in terms of values with the business itself. So that's why within the book we talk about choosing the right hearts, because if their heart is in the right place, very few things can go wrong, like for example competence or things of that nature. But even in the form of competence, as we discussed earlier, you can put that person into another role where they would be in fact competent. The way, or there are a few ways in which you can assess someone's heart and how they are as a person. We recommend, again, HR interviews and having very specific questions that when we give examples in the book. And also we recommend doing personality tests with these people. I personally prefer the DISC personality test, D-I-S-C, which stands for Dominant, Influence, Stable, Conscious. And Aaron uses a lot of Myers-Briggs in his companies. So whether you use one or the other, both, doesn't matter. Then you can test to see which ones you like in terms of the type of results or insights they give on someone. However, we do recommend having some form of this. For example, if you want to hire a salesperson that's a hunter, right? That's someone that's going to constantly be out there finding people, mingling with others, and so on and so forth. Typically, you wouldn't want to hire an introvert. You would want to hire an extrovert that's always focused on results, that's always, talkative, and so on and so forth, so that that person can do all of the networking that you need to get enough leads. The opposite is also true. If you need, for example, a business administrator or an accountant or someone that has very little interaction with others but needs to be very laser focused, they should be more around the conscious and stable side of DISC, right? People that do not need to engage in a lot of conversation. They do not need a lot of excitement. They're very, very happy and content doing whatever work they feel competent in, which is the opposite of the dominant and influent categories, right? So you can do a lot of due diligence on this. Look these things up. It'll help you understand yourself and help you understand others that you work with, and even within your family. There's actually an amazing book. We didn't mention it in the book, but I really resonated with it. It was called Have a New You by Friday, right? Dr. Kevin Lehman, if I remember correctly. And it was an amazing book. I really loved it, and I truly read it in 5 days. So I started on Monday, and by Friday I was done with the entire book. And it was really good, and it talks about the DISC personality type. So implement something like that within your companies, and you will not regret it, because you will learn so much around how to engage with people on your team. Another thing that we recommend in the book you do is embrace awesome. That's what we call it. So Aaron has a very cool story around this. He was the director of sales in a big corporation, and he was doing hiring, doing recruitment. And at one point, a painter came to an interview, and they were discussing, if he's appropriate for the role and what he's going to do in the role and so on and so forth. And Aaron was like, but you have no skill set in sales. Like, why would I hire you? And the guy literally said, well, because I really do not want to spend the rest of my days outside, either in the rain or in the burning hot, summer or whatever, just painting and just basically spending hours and hours doing mindless activities. I want to do more with my life. I want to provide better for my family, and so on and so forth. So he had the right heart, and he really wanted to do that. And so Aaron invited him for a few more interviews. They set expectations just like we teach in the book. They agreed on the I.R.A.C role description, which we're going to talk about in a second. And basically the guy went on. In a few short years, he became the #1 salesperson in the company. Not #1 regionally, but #1 nationally. He was the guy that everyone else in the company would go to for advice on how to sell more. So that's what we call embracing awesome. So someone doesn't need to have a background in whatever it is that you do. However, if they are an amazing person, right, Aaron calls them awesome, then you can work with them to gain the competencies and skills that they need for a specific role. Okay, and so now talking about roles, let's talk about I.R.A.C for a second. I've learned this concept from Aaron a few years ago, and it sounded very complicated the first time I heard it. However, the moment I started implementing it within our businesses, it was crazy useful. So let me explain each one of these. So I.R.A.C is a acronym for desired results, guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences. Within those categories, the desired result is basically what you want out of this role. So instead of saying, I want this role to post, let's say, post on Facebook, right? Post images or updates on Facebook. You say, I want this person to keep everyone in our community so engaged that they keep coming back and buying more from us at this rate. Whatever it is, the desired result that you want to explain, but you explain it as concretely as you can and using as many numbers as you can. So now anyone that comes to that role knows that if they are posting every single day or week, or doesn't matter, on Facebook, however, no one's engaging, no one's buying more, like there's no repeat sales, they know that they're actually failing in their role, because their role is not task-based, it's result-based, outcome-based. So you have a desired result. After that, you have guidelines. Guidelines basically tell people what they can and cannot do and what we recommend they do in certain roles. However, this is again not a task list. This is a guideline. For example, whenever you post on social media, you cannot use swear words, right? That's a guideline. That's something you use. Like you wouldn't say, you know, this is effing amazing or something like that, because you have the guideline telling you that you can't do things like that. But this again doesn't tell them exactly what they need to do. It just guides them based on your vision of what that should look. After that, you have resources. So resources have to do with all of the things that you put in place for this person within that role to succeed. So for example, when we hire a developer, they get access to a company email, they get access to Slack, they get access to courses we have in terms of engineering courses and so on and so forth, where they can constantly perfect their skill set. They get access to mentorship from from seniors and the directors within the company. They get access to Bitbucket or whatever that specific company uses to house the code, etc., etc. So all of these are the resources that you give this person so that they can do their work and succeed and thrive within their work, right? Obviously later you can ask for feedback. Hey, do you feel you need anything else within your role? And they can say yes or no, I have everything, right? And you can have very productive conversations on the subject. However, give them everything that you believe they would need in order to succeed. For example, if you're hiring a customer success person, a resource that will be very useful for them is a document outlining as many templated or canned responses as you can for as many different scenarios that people can ask questions on. Like, for example, do you guys accept installments or just one time? And then you have an answer for that. Or do you guys answer the phone or just over email? And then you have an answer for that, etc., etc. So all of these are useful resources that you can give new people dependent on their role. After resources, we have what we call accountability. So within accountability, there are three main things you need to nail down. Number one, who are you accountable to? Just one person. What one person is this role accountable to? If they're, for example, a marketing manager, they might be accountable to the chief of marketing. And the chief of marketing is accountable to the chief executive officer, to the CEO, and the CEO is accountable to the owner of the company, right? So that's how you would have a trace of accountability. Number two, you would want to make sure that you agree on how often that accountability has to occur. So is it daily, is it weekly, is it monthly? For example, people that I work with at the board level, many of them are accountable to me, just once per quarter. So once per quarter, we have a meeting, and then they tell me, this is sales, this is profit, this is how we've invested the money, etc., etc. So this takes me very well to point 3, which is, what does a report look like from you? So for example, so we talk about, number 1, who are you accountable to? Number 2, how often? And number 3, with what? So what does a report look like, an accountability report? So if you're a content writer, it can look like the articles you've written yesterday or last week. If you are a engineer, it can look like the features you've delivered on, or the bugs you've fixed, or things of that nature. If you're a director of sales, it can look at the number of products you've sold, the average deal value, how many of those are recurring clients or new clients, and so on and so forth. So what should be included in there? And then finally, you have consequences. And consequences are twofold. You have consequences for success and consequences for failure. In terms of success, you can have consequences like, for example, as long as you succeed in your role, you'll keep getting a stable monthly income, your salary. If you deliver well on your role, so let's say you're a salesperson, because this is very easy to tackle. Let's say in your role, the outcome of your role is that you need to generate at least $10,000 worth of new business every single month. But what if you generate 15,000, right? Like 50% more than your minimum? Well, maybe you get a bonus. That's a consequence of success. What if you generate 50,000, right? That you get an even bigger bonus based on success, or you get, I don't know, a free plane ticket to wherever you want to go with your wife or husband, right? Or spouse in general. And so it's something that you can literally make as custom as you want for every single role, right? So these are the consequences for success, and these are the various degrees of success that we expect you to potentially have. And likewise for failure. So failure in the same role we talked about, is getting under $10,000 per month. And then you can say, okay, well, there are different levels of failure. Are you at 0? Okay, if you need to close $10,000 worth per month, then that's $2,500 per week. So in your consequences for failure, you can say, how many weeks can someone go with 0 sales, right? And you might say, okay, if they go 1 week with 0 sales, then the consequence for that is they need to have an urgent strategic meeting with their manager to see what they can do differently, so that they don't have another week when they hit 0. If they have another week when they hit 0, they need to have another strategic meeting, this time maybe with a team, and also they get a formal warning that they have 2 more weeks in which, if they hit 0 2 consecutive weeks again, then they will have to be let go, right? So again, you can make this as custom as you want, and ultimately the ultimate consequence for failure is that they are let go from the company. So explain all of this and share all of this with people when they come on, because at the end of the day, you want all of these expectations to be set, and when you bring someone on, you want them to agree to all of these parts of the I.R.A.C role description. The action step is clear. Start using I.R.A.C role descriptions when hiring other individuals within the company, and even for your current team, you can start writing I.R.A.C role descriptions. And if you're a solopreneur, you can do that for yourself. Like, what is my role? How should I conduct myself? And this tends to help a lot. Now, moving onward, in terms of hiring, there are a few things I just want to mention. Again, there's a lot in the book. However, today, the most important thing I want to say here is that when you hire other individuals, you need to make sure you're hiring with purpose. Okay, so for example, if you've defined your org chart, we talked about the org chart a little bit earlier. Defining that org chart means that you now have a view of exactly where people need to be in your organization, and also where you have people and where you do not have people. So based on where you do not have people, you ask yourself a very simple question. What one role, if I would fill today, would have the highest positive impact on my company? So once you determine that, you then write a I.R.A.C role description, and then you start hiring for those people. You start an entire recruitment process. Within that recruitment process, obviously there are many, many ways in which you can recruit. What we're going to talk about today is what to look for whilst you're recruiting. Okay, so there are a few traits that I'm just going to briefly mention here. Number one, they need to be competent, right? And there are many questions you can ask to gauge competency based on someone's role. However, they need to be competent, because if they're not competent, you will frustrate one another mutually. They will be frustrated because they can't get what you want. You will be frustrated because they're not getting what you want, right? So competency is a must, right? Number two, they should be passionate about the topic. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to developers that wanted a job in our engineering company. They're 20-something years old, at the end of their university degree or even after, and I would ask, okay, show me some projects you've worked on. And they're like, well, I wasn't employed until now. Okay, I got that from your CV, but what projects have you worked on? Well, I didn't work on any projects because I wasn't employed. No, that's not true. Anyone that's passionate about whatever topic or whatever skill set they want to master, they will engage in that. I've never met a developer, a passionate developer, that doesn't have, half a dozen projects that they've done, on either somewhere online on Git, or they have, their cool projects, like, for example, a video game they try to build, or anything that they've tried to do. And so that's how you can see competence. If someone's passionate about writing, you can ask, show me some of your writing, like show me the little book you've written, or show me the poetry you've written. If someone's passionate about design, they will have designed either interfaces or artwork or whatever they're passionate in. So ask for those examples so that you can see whether or not they're passionate, and that's how you can gauge passion, right? Are they willing to do the work without being paid at all? If they are, they're probably passionate about it. You don't need to ask a passionate pianist to play the piano. They will love playing the piano. Whatever occasion they have, they will just play it. The third thing I highly recommend you look for is people that are responsible, right? So you want to make sure that these individuals take their responsibility seriously. And it's one thing to say it, and it's one thing to actually mean it. So responsibility, you can gauge, like, for example, are they punctual when they come to the interview? Are they dressed appropriately? Are they prepared in terms of knowledge about the role, knowledge about the company, and so on and so forth? What's the quality of their questions, etc., etc.? So you can determine how responsible they are based on a few of these metrics. I will never forget the first time I met Michelle, one of my, let's say, rock stars within my company, and a person that's now incredibly dear to me. I wouldn't imagine my life without her. When she came to her interview, and we had a physical interview here in our offices, she literally came so well dressed. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. And she was applying for the lowest role in the company. When I say low, I mean like maybe the lowest paid or something like that. I think it was like $300 or $400 or something like that. But she was dressed, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I looked at her like, wow, you really want this role, right? And it was super cool. She had correct posture. She asked amazing questions. She answered super well. I couldn't believe it. I almost hired her on the spot if we wouldn't have these principles of, reviewing things and, sleeping on things. But it was so good, and I'm so happy she decided to come to us. We've had a great relationship since. I think she's been with us for 6 or 7 years now, and she's very happy. We are very happy to have her and very grateful, right? And I have dozens of examples like that of people I've met that were very, very responsible. And you can tell, again, it's a feeling. You get that feeling that they are or not responsible. Another thing that you should be very focused on is, are they hardworking or not? And again, this has to do with what have they done until now. So you ask, okay, you've finished your college degree. What else have you done? And they say, oh, nothing else. I was just studying. Probably, again, they're not hardworking. They might have found their study is very difficult. Like they had to learn a lot and so on and so forth because they didn't want to cheat, which is acceptable. At the same time, the vast majority of people, we know we've been through university. We know we have a lot of spare time whilst we are at university. So if someone doesn't do anything at all whilst they're in uni or after that, or they don't have any passion projects or anything like that, in the vast majority of cases, they don't show you that they are hardworking, right? Again, vast majority. I know the reason I'm saying that is because I know some people that are very dear to me that whenever they pick something, that's the only thing they do. So if they pick a course, they just do that course for 3 months and nothing else. When they get the job, they do just that job and nothing else. They don't, move around. And I appreciate that about them. So if you are determining that that is how they are, that's also very good, because if you give them a very specific job, right, then they will do good on that, because that's the only thing that will be on their mind from the morning until the evening. After that, something you should gauge is intelligence, right? Can I have conversations with this person that make it beyond the basic superficial hi, hello, how are you, and so on and so forth? Like, can we talk real business? Can we talk solutions in terms of challenges, right? Like, hey, we have this challenge, how would you solve it? And you can ask so many questions like that, and you can give them specific challenges and see what's their level of intellect. Intellect is always problem solving. That's how you define intellect. Intellect isn't memory. Memory is, have you done this before? Yes. How did you do it this way? Okay. What if this new thing happens? How will you deal with a new situation? And that's typically how you gauge intellect, right? So you need to make sure that they're intelligent. If they're not intelligent, they can still work in your company. However, you need to set your expectations correctly, because they will never be a strategist, or in most cases, they won't be a strategist. They can be an amazing, HR person that just helps people and supports them and so on and so forth, but they don't come up with HR principles. They're just the very nice, guy or gal that everyone knows, everyone loves, they're always happy and so on and so forth. They don't need to be the smartest person in the room to add value to the company. Another trait that's very important is ethics. So is the person ethical? And you can determine this based on many questions that you can ask in terms of, for example, how would you give a refund to someone? Some people can say, oh, if someone asks for a refund, I will just give them a refund. And that's not ethical, because maybe the person bought the product, used the product, maybe even tampered with or distorted the product, and now they're asking for a refund, even though it's not the fault of the product that they destroyed it. So you need to set a set of questions for your business. And again, we give some examples in the book, but basically figure out how can you determine whether or not this person is going to be ethical within your business. And then after that, this also has to do with the next point, which is friendliness. So with regards to friendliness, we personally only hire friendly people. We only work with friendly people because we can't stand, arrogance. We can't stand narcissists. We can't stand, many people that can do good, but very few people like working with them, or they think they're better than others or whatever. Typically, we hire friendly individuals. And friendly, not just when convenient, friendly in all situations, right? And so you can ask them very specific questions. What would you do if a client would yell at you, or, if one of your colleagues would insult you? How would you react, right, in this hypothetical situation? And then you can gauge if their answers are honest. Regardless, if you cannot determine if they're being honest or not, but they answer the correct answers, either way, something else we recommend in the book is to have a trial period, right? So within the trial period, you can see if they actually are the way they say they are. Otherwise, you can make reference. And by the way, record all of your interviews, because the ones you hire, you need to be able to prove to them that you've set this expectation before, right? And prove to yourself that you're not crazy and you actually told them that, hey, this is how we do business here, right? You showed them the dig-rack, you set expectations, they came on, and they're not fulfilling those expectations. You need to have the proof that, hey, this is what we agreed to. And if you're not going to do this or be this person that you said you are, then we can't work together. So those are very important aspects. You would want to find people that are aligned with whatever it is your business does. So, or your team, if you're, again, a team in a bigger corporation. So the reason why this is important is, for example, if someone would hire me, like, I can be very, very good and I can help businesses grow like crazy. However, if someone in the wine area, like they make wine, they produce it, they bottle it, they distribute it, whatever. If someone in that company hires me, my heart wouldn't be in the right place, because I don't drink alcohol. So what am I going to do? I'm going to promote and, distribute something that I would never consume myself, right? It doesn't matter how tasty it is, by the way. I really like this taste of wine. I like many ciders, many beers, and so on and so forth. However, I just decide not to drink alcohol. So I wouldn't be aligned with that. So find people that resonate with your vision, with your mission, with your core values, and so on, and they really love what it is that you stand for, because it will be so much easier to work with them, you know, in the months and years in which you will have the pleasure of working with one. Moving on from there, the final thing that we believe that you should search for is loyalty. So, is that person loyal to whatever it is that they set out to do? You will notice that there are many people that we call job hoppers, right? They pick up a job and then they stay there for 6 months to a year, and then they go to another job. They stay there 6 months for a year, then they go to another job, and so on. And so you have a lot of people like that that don't stay true to their commitments, because probably the company that hired them expected them to stay longer, right? So either they left because they're not loyal, or they left because they were fired, right? Because they weren't doing what they had to do in their role. So within that, you need to look at these people and say, okay, what's your career until now? What would happen if 1 year, or what would happen if 1 year from now the business isn't a good place, right? And we can't give you a raise? What would happen, right? And so put them in these situations, like gauge what do they care about, what do they value? Because we've been shocked in the past where we thought some people were very loyal, but at the end of the day they weren't, and they proved it to us in many different ways. In other, let's say, different surprises, we were very pleasantly surprised to see, oh my gosh, these people, even though this is a very bad time for us now, they're very loyal, they're working extra, they're figuring it out, you know, they're helping us get through this turmoil, and so on and so forth. So you can have both negative surprises and positive surprises. So allow yourself to be surprised, and don't be too, let's say, don't take things too personally, because I have taken things personally in the past and it hasn't, you know, been valuable to me in any way, because at the end of the day, many people see whatever they do for you as a job, and then they conduct the rest of their life outside the job. I hope that that's not the case for you and your team. However, for some people it might be the case, and so you don't need to judge those individuals, because at the end of the day they still need to work, and when they're at work, and they do great, and they're a great team player. However, if 1 year from now they get a better offer, they're just gonna jump. So after we talked about all of these 9 traits that we recommend you search for, what you should do, the action steps here, is to create a checklist or a spreadsheet that helps you basically keep track of these. Like whenever you have interviews, before the interviews, have the checklist of these 9 things and write specific questions for each one of them, or multiple questions for each one of them, and then make sure you tag all of them within tackle all of them within an interview. And this is how you can have very structured interviews and make sure you have the same interview across the board with everyone. We do have some recruitment best practices, and I don't want to go too deeply into that. However, what I am going to mention is that there are always ways to find good people. Like you can have local, let's say, job boards, you can have national job boards, international job boards. Just look online at, you know, what job boards are available to you and where you can post jobs. Many of them are for free. Some of them cost a little bit of money. However, if you're hiring for a very important role, right, you can pay $50 or $100 or however much the job board costs. And if it actually doesn't work for you, like you don't get, you know, 50 or 100 applicants or however many applicants, then you can probably ask for a refund, right, if it doesn't work. We've never asked for a refund from job boards, because we literally, whenever, I remember last time we paid like $300 for a job ad that we put up, and we got 140 applicants, right? And so even if we wouldn't have hired a single one, we literally almost got applicants at $2 a piece, right? And so it was a very good deal for us for that specific role. Find them, and you can find them on LinkedIn as well. There are many places there. I'm sure you can be creative and find people, for example, on Reddit or on Craigslist or things of that nature. And whatever is relevant for you locally, you can use that. Or if you want to hire in different countries, you can use job boards that are specific for those countries, and you can do a little bit of due diligence to see what those are, and that will help you find so many great candidates, right, that you'll be bombarded with resumes and CVs and cover letters. So now, based on the interview itself, once you've, let's say you have the 140 applicants and you're starting to interview, just a few principles I want to make sure. Number one, use the sheet we explained earlier, and also you can determine how, like, you can give people grades on each one of these, 1 to 5. That's what we do, right? So someone can be maybe a 2 on loyalty, but they can be a 5 on intelligence and a 4 on competence, and so on and so forth. So we give them grades, and then it's very easy after that if you implement principle number 2, which is to have the exact same interview and the exact same questions with everyone for one specific role, because then what you can do is you can say, oh, well, David got 24, you know, Frank got 17, this other, and so on. So you can very easily then, based on the numbers you gave them, to see, okay, who's the top 3 or who are the top 3, and then decide from there. The final thing I want to recommend is when you ask questions, please, please, please ask open-ended questions. So don't ask things like, do you have competence in PHP? You can say yes or no. It doesn't really help you much. What you can ask is, could you please describe the extent of your experience in PHP? And then they need to say, oh, well, I've been working in PHP for 6 years. I've done these projects. I've learned this. I love this, and so on and so forth. And now you get a much, much better answer. And based on that, you can grade them. But on a yes or no, you can't really grade anyone. Okay, so ask open-ended questions. Make sure you implement all of these. And now we're going to move on to the next section, which is what should you have in maybe a second interview, or we always recommend having multiple interviews. The first one is just to filter, and then in the second one you can go a little bit more detailed. So what are some of the details you can go into? Well, number one, you can give people a company overview, like, hey, this is who we actually are. This is what's online. We've nailed down that, you know, you've done your due diligence. However, these are some things under the hood that many people don't know. These are the bigger acts. This is, you know, how we agree on priorities every week. This is what we do for the quarter. This is how we manage the year, and so on and so forth. So you can give company overviews. You can talk about how you include people, like how you have for example, a 9-month inclusion within the company and a trial period, and what can they expect during that trial period. And you can basically have a lot of very disciplined processes and procedures and systems that you implement for these people, because there's a lot of statistics that say that if you treat people very well in the first 3 months of their employment, then chances are that they'll stay with you for years and, you know, pay dividends for a long time, right? And so most everyone would be the same, because if you join a company and they're really good at onboarding you, at including you, at answering all of your questions, at doing all of that, they're basically preparing you for life, right? For the life after this little, you know, dating phase that we've gone through of 3 months. And then once you're prepared for life, you then need to take reins of your own role and become the, let's say, the owner, the powerful owner of whatever it is you need to do. So now, instead of you needing other people's guidance and support and so on, now you can be in a position where you can give more than you get. Within that position, now it's much harder for someone to just leave, because mentally they're already locked in. They already know what they need to do. They're already competent at it. They're already helping their team members, right? They're in a very happy place, right? And so we typically see that people stay in that happy place for, you know, maybe almost a decade. The only reason I don't say more than a decade is because my oldest company is, I think, 13 years old, right? And so based on that, we have, I think the longest tenure of someone is around 8 years at this point in time, 8 or 9 years. So no one in our companies has stayed for more than a decade, but Aaron, for example, has people in his companies that have stayed there for over 20 years, which is wow. You know, I almost know no one that stayed in companies for 20 years. So the things we're teaching you work, and basically the more you implement them, the more you will see success in the various degrees of, let's say, business areas that you want to practice in. Another thing that we recommend you talk to people about within the interview section is how you work on in terms of procedures, and what are some of the standard procedures that they should work on as people within the company. And you should say, hey, especially if they have prior experience in other companies, you can ask them, how did you post on social media before? They can say, well, I would have access to the to the Facebook Business Manager. I would go in and I would post here. You can say, okay, for us it's a little bit different. We use this tool that allows us to post on all social media, and so you will get access to this, and this is what you do, and so on. So you can basically tell them about how things are different in your company, and then after that you can start giving them some reinforcement and feedback based on the answers they give you, right? So for example, if you talk, like for example, one thing that for us resonates a lot and is part of our culture values is the value of love. We want everyone to love themselves and love one another, right? And love their work, and in general, allow themselves to be loving towards everything in life. So that's one of the reasons we don't tolerate swearing or yelling or things of that nature, because that doesn't come from a loving place. In our industry, something else that happens that I can warn you about is we have developers applying for jobs. They do great in the interview, but then when they actually get the job, we notice that they're much poorer in terms of competence than the person we hired. And then we realize they actually subcontracted their work to someone else, but because we insist that people turn on their video, right, on the weekly calls, we can see them. And so you can see that, oh, it's a different person on the video than who we hired, right? So that's just a little parenthesis that we find funny sometimes. It didn't happen too often, but it did happen a few times, and we just immediately canceled the contract with those people. So be prepared to have these interviews be very vivid, very alive, and then see how people react. Because if you tell someone, hey, we really have this value of love, like we do not tolerate any form of aggression, any form of let's say anger or things of that nature, and then maybe they become upset. Maybe they say, what are you talking about? What if someone's really, really bad or whatever, and there's no reason for me to be nice or polite? So be very mindful and make this a collaborative conversation, right? It's a back and forth. You give reinforcement for the things that are let's say aligned with the rules of the game as you set them, and you provide them feedback if you see that there's a lack of alignment, and based on how they react to that feedback, you can hire them or not.